Maybe I'm just really easy to please and this is like not that extraordinary. So fucking weird in the best way possible. That is the kind of loyalty that I want out of my friends. If you clicked on this video, it means you're a weirdo. This really starts to drive him mad. What's scarier than my own mind? Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I have a series where I recommend various weird and disturbing literary fiction books, and this is part 3 in that series. So if you have not yet seen part 1 and 2, I'll put links to those videos down in the description. You don't necessarily have to watch those videos, but if you clicked on this video, it means you're a weirdo. And I mean that in the best way possible. So why not go get even more recommendations? So the first book on this list is a book that I used to own, and it's one book where I regret selling it. I like to keep my book collection pretty tight. I really only like to keep books that are kind of like all-stars. I like to think of my book collection as really intentionally curated, but that can also result in me prematurely selling books before I have realized that they actually did leave quite an impact on me, and they really have wormed their way into my brain. So this first book is an example of that. That is At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, and this was translated into the English by Anna Moschovakis. So this book actually won the 2021 Booker Prize. I was originally drawn to this book because I was in an airport bookstore and the title was just so heavy metal. So I felt like I couldn't not buy it. So we're following a Senegalese man who is fighting in World War I with the French army. During the battle, one of his friends is fatally injured, and his friend asks him to kill him out of mercy, to put him out of his pain. But our main character is unable to go through with this mercy killing, and his inability to do that haunts him throughout the rest of the novel. He really starts to see this inability to give his friend mercy as extreme cowardice, and this really starts to drive him mad. So in an effort to avenge his friend's death, he starts this macabre ritual where at the end of every day of battle, he crosses enemy lines and begins to collect body parts of enemy soldiers. At first, his comrades think that this is an honorable deed, but as he begins to collect more and more body parts, they wonder if he isn't actually a hero, but a sorcerer. So really at the heart of this novel is this man who is driven to madness and basically to the ends of his psyche in order to try to do right by his friend and avenge his friend. And honestly, as a Taurus sun with a Scorpio rising, that is the kind of loyalty that I want out of my friends. This is a book where when I first read it, it kind of scrambled my brain in a way where I had to sit with it for days or weeks even to figure out what it meant and what it meant to me. And this is one that just really has not left me. So I definitely want to purchase this again, and I highly recommend it. The Cormorant by Stephen Gregory is about a family that inherits an old cabin from a long-lost uncle, and the only stipulation of them inheriting this cabin is that they must also inherit the uncle's bird and care for this bird. When they get to the cabin, they find that the bird is a cormorant, and it behaves very oddly. It behaves kind of like a cantankerous old man, and at first they kind of dismiss the bird as just a cranky old bird and they'll take care of it and just wait for it to die. But then as they spend more time in the cabin and with the bird, they begin to wonder if perhaps the bird is not a bit more evil than they originally thought. So I would say that this is disturbing because this family does have a young child who begins to interact with this bird, and as the bird becomes increasingly sinister and malevolent, there is concern that the child is in danger. What I really liked about this book, though, is that the way it's written is so subtle, and there are never really overt passages where the author is like, hey, our main character is going crazy. But as our main character spends more and more time with the bird, it could even be just something as subtle as a shift in like a single word. And you can tell like, oh, the character is kind of really starting to slip. And I liked that the author wasn't like holding our hand and like really spelling it out for us throughout this. I liked that they were sort of leaving these subtle hints and clues for us to uncover. And I found this to be a very captivating read and sometimes a little bit disturbing, depending on your tastes. So very early on in the book, we are informed of how the uncle died and how the bird reacted when the uncle died. When he collapsed onto the floor of the boat, he gripped at his seizing chest and struck his head on the petrol tank. And as he lay convulsing for just a few seconds, the cormorant sat and watched. Only the slow blinking of its eyes showed that any muscle stirred in its green-black frame. The bird stared into the face of the dying man. When the man lay still, his chest clenched in the rigor of death. When a dribble of saliva glistened on his chin, the cormorant dropped from its perch on the boat's cabin and landed with its wide, wet feet on his belly. Ian was dead, and his cheeks were pitted from the blows of the cormorant's beak. His lips were torn. The tender tissues of his gums were split. One eye remained intact. When they had taken the body away, the bird heaved itself onto the deck of its master's boat. It was seen through the rest of the evening in that warm summer's night, hunched on the top of the cabin. It only blinked and cleaned a few morsels of soft flesh from its beak. This was the bird that we inherited. Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls is about a housewife in like the 1950s or 60s who is preparing dinner for her husband one evening when a 7-foot-tall frogman invades her home and befriends her, and they start an illicit love affair. But it's not very focused on the romance, I would say. It's more about loneliness, especially the loneliness of being a housewife in that era. And it deals with a lot of darker themes as well. So the frogman is escaped from this scientific facility that caught him and found him in the ocean. So he is very unfamiliar with human behavior. So there were some funny parts where the main character is having to describe human behavior and why we do the things we do to this outsider. And that is always very interesting and fun to me. But then it also kind of has these moments of melancholy and seems very Frankenstein-esque, where this frogman, much like Frankenstein's monster, doesn't realize sometimes the harm that it does. So as the novel progresses and this woman is harboring this frogman for longer and longer, more and more people are getting killed. So this is a really short one. It is very bizarre, and I thought it was so fun. So if any of that sounds interesting, you should read it. Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer is about Area X, which has been cut off from human civilization and contact for decades. It has really been reclaimed by nature, and various expeditions have gone into Area X to explore it and understand more about it, only to have succumbed to madness, mass suicide, cancer, etc. So the novel opens with us following the 12th expedition into Area X, which comprises 4 women: an anthropologist, a surveyor, a psychologist, and our narrator, who is a biologist. Their mission is simple. They just want to map the terrain and detail any observations made while in Area X, while at the same time trying to remain untarnished by Area X. So this book is unlike anything I've ever read before. I actually watched the movie first before reading this, and I think I kind of recommend that. Having watched the movie first, it's not that I think the movie is better by any means, but this book is just so abstract, and having the movie as a frame of reference helped me to understand the book a little bit more. And it also made me appreciate the book that much more, because after reading this, I was like, how the fuck did someone read this and adapt this into a movie? This is one of the most abstract things I've ever read. I'm usually not a sci-fi girly, and this is just fab. It's one of those where I cannot wrap my head around how someone wrote this. This is a trilogy, but I could not get through the second book. So I think if you are daunted by the fact that it's a trilogy, you don't necessarily have to read the whole thing. This book could definitely just be a standalone. So I think you should read Annihilation. We Had to Remove This Post by Hanna Bervoets and translated by Emma Rault is about a group of friends who work as content moderators at a social media platform. A large part of their day is screening very violent, disturbing videos, images, and content in order to determine if it is suitable for publication on their platform. Really what we are observing is the downward spiral of these people as they are exposed to more and more of this violence and vitriol and hate and racism, homophobia, etc., etc. What we really see is how this content unwillingly changes these characters and their morals and their psyches. A chilling, powerful, and urgent literary masterpiece about who or what determines our worldview, who sets the boundaries, and just how much a person can be asked to accept. I think most people who read this do not like this, but I am a We Had to Remove This Post apologist. I think this book gets way more hate than it deserves. It's short. I think it packs a punch. I will say I think people who didn't like this didn't like that there wasn't a ton of overt graphic violence or disturbing content detailed. We're sort of more so just seeing the effects of the content on the characters. But to me, I find that to be so much more effective, and it leaves so much more room for reader interpretation. And I think really that's so fun because it forces you to sort of fill in the blanks. And the blanks are only as disturbing as your own psyche as the reader goes. So I think it's in some ways scarier that way, because what's scarier than my own mind? Nothing But the Night by John Williams is about a man who is very rattled by being contacted by his estranged father to have dinner. He is currently living in a hotel. He is from a very wealthy family, so he doesn't have to work, and his father basically just pays his way. Our main character is a very bizarre man. He is not well liked or well accepted into society or by his peers, and we're really following him over the course of this evening as he meets with his father, confronts the trauma that he has concerning his father, and how he spirals after this dinner, and how him not dealing with this trauma results in an act of violence against someone else. If you're familiar with John Williams' prose, you know the writing is going to be great. Sitting in his rooms all morning with the shutters drawn was bad for him. He thought of things that he should not think of. He remembered things that he should not remember. Like a doctor who watches disease creep upon him and who does nothing to forestall it. He sometimes saw himself as he sat alone and remembered. They had told him that there were things he must put out of his mind, that he must forget. And he had listened to them and he had agreed. Yet, when he was faced with the necessity of following their advice, he became curiously helpless. There was something that he did not like about the morning, something he thought almost obscene. It was as if time arose regularly from a nightly grave and stalked the earth, touching the earth and all that walked upon it with clammy hands. There was a moldy, fetid fragrance, released by the early dew, that assailed his nostrils unpleasantly like the musty odor of dark rooms in forgotten houses. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, and translated into the English by Schwartz, is about a group of women who are imprisoned by unknown male guards. Our narrator is so young, and she was taken to the prison so young that she does not remember what life was like before being imprisoned. There are no windows, so they have no sense of time. And very early on, our narrator shows herself as being the key to their escape and survival in this dystopian world. Also, this is totally unrelated to the book, but the copy that I bought looks fine on the outside. But then when I got home, one of the pages was like crumpled up. So I was like, oh cool, I'll just smooth it out. And it's like a printing error where it like didn't get cut correctly. I've never seen that before. Maybe I'm just really easy to please and this is like not that extraordinary. But that is information you now know and can do with how you please. Mr. Wakefield's Crusade by Bernice Rubens is about a very neurotic, paranoid, weird man who witnesses a man die in line at the post office in front of him, and in an act of spontaneity, he steals the letter that the man was going to mail from his corpse before leaving. And what he finds in the letter is the man apologizing for killing his wife. And this leads our man to go on this wacky crusade to try to solve the mystery of what actually happened to this woman, why he murdered this woman, where this woman's body is. If you've read Bernice Rubens, you know that she is like the master of black comedy. I am in my black comedy era right now, and this did not disappoint. I think there are so many funny lines. Bernice Rubens' characters are so fucking weird in the best way possible. This kept me guessing the whole time. I definitely did not expect the ending. That happened. Then he did an extraordinary thing. Quite simply, he fell down dead. It was as if he had gone to the post office for the express purpose of mailing himself to heaven. Good day, I said. Quite like summer, I added, knowing that as a good phrase for temporizing, for it could lead to all manner of meteorological discourse, and gives one time to marshal one's thoughts. I put on a cheery face too, for I was not to know it was a house of bereavement. The woman bid me good day in her turn and was clearly going to give the weather short shrift, for her expression was businesslike, as if her time was valuable. cold, though, I pursued. Might even turn to snow. I waited for her opinion on that forecast, but she was plainly not interested. Can I help you? She asked. I took the glass of water that she offered and avoided her look of concern. Such a look has always unnerved me, for it threatens intimacy. I do not wish to be known, not even by myself, for there are things about me that I am obliged to think are unknowable. But I won't go into that. This is definitely more on the weird end of the spectrum rather than disturbing, but I think it's a fun, silly, goofy time, and I think you should read it. All right, those are 8 more weird and or disturbing literary fiction recommendations that I think you should read. I have read and loved all of these, and I hope you do too. So you can like this video if you want, comment if you've read any of these, if you want to read any of these, give me some recommendations similar to these that you think I might like. You could subscribe. I love you guys very much, and I'll see you in whatever video I make next. Bye.